Welcome to Back on the Stack, a CEDH channel. The group got together online again to record some spicy CEDH action. We hope you enjoy watching it as much as we enjoyed playing it. Please leave a comment letting us know what you thought about the gameplay. We are always taking advice to tune our games into the best production that we can. If you do enjoy the video, please like, subscribe, and share with friends. Now, let's get right into it and see what decks are being piloted tonight. Hey fam, tonight I'm piloting Talion, Kindly Lord. To be honest, I feel the most comfortable playing a Dimir Shell, so I'm hoping to just draw a lot of cards and put together a win. There's a heavy reanimation package in this build, but ultimately I'm just looking for a combo with either Thassa's Oracle, Laboratory Maniac, or last resort, a Bloodchief Ascension and Mindcrank combo. I basically kept this hand because I can get Talion out turn 1 and hopefully start drawing cards, so I decided to keep it.
Hello, my name is Levi and today I'm playing the partner pair of Rograk and Thrasios. This deck aims to get set up as fast as the turbo decks in the format while also being able to grind mid-range. The main game plan is to obtain infinite mana, sink it into Thrasios, and hopefully win with a Finale Devastation. This opening hand has a Temur Sabertooth and a Way of Finding Dockside, as well as some fast mana to hopefully get this done by turn 3 or 4.
Hey everybody, it's Eli, and tonight I'm playing my take on a Mad Farm list. So, this is Tymna Jeska with Delny Secret Commander, so trying to utilize a bunch of creatures that I can get value with Delny and with Tymna to draw a bunch of cards. I'm also notably not on Ad Nauseam. This is a Bolas' Citadel list, trying to cheat Bolas' Citadel out onto the battlefield utilizing Goblin Engineer, Goblin Welder, Entomb, or Magda. I kept this opening hand because it gives me a turn 1 draw engine, which is kind of hard to come by in Mardu. So hopefully I can utilize Esper Sentinel to draw into some more mana and see where we go from there.
What's up, Spooky here, piloting Pantlaza. I have top 16 264 plus player events, including the Boil with this list, and I'm very excited to show it off in this video. This deck looks to put together a Food Chain or Dockside combo to infinitely cast or flicker Pantlaza and cast our deck to win. The main reason I kept this hand on the mold of 5 is to have a little protection and ramp to hopefully draw into a win.
With introductions out of the way, J-Rock will kick us off. He draws and plays a basic swamp for turn. He casts Jeweled Lotus. He cracks it and casts his commander, Talion, the Kindly Lord. It ETBs and he chooses the number 1. He passes the turn. Levi draws and plays Bloodstained Mire. He pays a life, sacks it, and fetches up Volcanic Island to the battlefield. He casts Mana Vault. Talion triggers, he loses 2 life, and J-Rock draws. He casts Relic of Legends. He casts his commander, Rograk. Talion triggers, he loses 2 life, and J-Rock draws. Levi casts Arcane Signet. He casts Paradise Mantle. He equips it to Rograk and passes the turn. Eli draws and plays Marsh Flats. He pays a life, sacks it, and fetches up Scrubland to the battlefield. He casts Esper Sentinel. Talion triggers, he loses 2 life, and J-Rock draws. Eli passes the turn. Spooky draws and plays Arid Mesa for turn. He pays a life, sacks it, and fetches up Savannah to the battlefield. He casts Birds of Paradise. Talion triggers, he loses 2 life, and J-Rock draws. Spooky passes the turn. J-Rock draws and plays Gemstone Caverns for turn. He casts Cabal Ritual. Esper triggers and Eli draws. J-Rock adds 3 black to his mana pool. He casts Mindcrank. He casts Putrid Imp. He passes the turn. In his upkeep, Levi loses a life from Mana Vault and mills 1 card due to Mindcrank. He draws and casts Green Sun Zenith where X equals 2. Esper triggers and Eli draws. Levi tutors up Kinnan, Bonder Prodigy to the battlefield. He casts Lotus Petal. He passes the turn. Eli draws and plays Phyrexian Tower for turn. He also casts Cabal Ritual and adds 3 black to his mana pool. He casts Dauthi Voidwalker. He moves to combat and swings Esper at Spooky. He takes 1 damage and mills 1 card due to Mindcrank, which now goes to the Dauthi zone. Eli then passes his turn. Spooky draws and plays Exotic Orchard for turn. He casts Grand Abolisher. He passes. J-Rock draws and missing a land drop takes no action and discards the hand size, putting Delay into exile with the Void counter. In his upkeep, Levi loses a life from his Mana Vault and mills 1 card due to Mindcrank. He draws and taps Rograk through Paradise Mantle to produce 2 green. He uses 1 green to re-equip the mantle to Kinnan, tapping him to add an additional 2 blue mana. He casts his other commander, Thrasios, Triton Hero. Talion triggers, he loses 2 life, and J-Rock draws. Levi mills 2 due to Mind Crank. He then transmutes Muddle of the Mixture. He tutors Dockside Extortionist to his hand. He casts Dockside. Talion triggers, he loses 2 life, and J-Rock draws. Levi mills 2 due to Mind Crank. Dockside enters and he creates 2 treasure tokens. He passes the turn. Eli draws, takes no actions, and attempts to pass. However, in response, Spooky casts Enlighten Tutor. Talion triggers, he loses 2 life, and J-Rock draws. Spooky then mills 2 cards due to Mind Crank. Esper triggers and Eli draws. Spooky then tutors Mana Crypt to the top of his library, and the turn moves to Spooky. Spooky draws and casts Mana Crypt. Esper triggers and Eli draws. Spooky casts his commander, Pantlaza, Sun Favored. It ETBs and he discovers 4, exiling cards from the top of his library until he hits a non-land card with CMC 4 or less. He reveals Felwar Stone and casts it for free. He passes the turn. J-Rock draws and plays Reflecting Pool for turn. He announces to the table that despite his awesome card draw, he has to move to his end step now, and he has to discard a hand size. He asks the group if anyone can take care of Dauthi because he is going to be forced to discard some absolute bangers, and he does not want to give Eli free access to them under Dauthi. After a bit of discussion, Levi casts a mini Psych Rift targeting Dauthi. Esper triggers and Levi pays. In response, Eli channels Touch the Spirit Realm, targeting Dauthi, not realizing that we are already in J-Rock's end step, meaning Dauthi won't return until Levi's end step. It resolves, and Dauthi is temporarily exiled. J-Rock then discards to hand size, Peer into the Abyss, Praetor's Grasp, and Mystical Tutor. He passes the turn. In his upkeep, Levi loses a life from the Mana Vault and mills 1 card due to Mind Crank. He draws and plays a Tropical Island for turn. He taps Kinnan through Paradise Mantle to produce 2 green. He uses 1 of the green to re-equip the mantle and repeat the process until all of his creatures are tapped and he has added a total of 5 green mana to his mana pool. He casts Tamer Sabertooth. In response, Spooky casts Lightning Bolt, targeting Dockside. Talion triggers, he loses 2 life, and J-Rock draws. He mills 2 cards due to Mind Crank. Esper triggers, and Eli draws. In response, Levi activates Thrasios. He reveals Windswept Heath to the battlefield tapped. He activates Thrasios 1 more time and reveals a Green Sun Zenith to hand. Then Lightning Bolt resolves. Tamer Sabertooth enters the battlefield, and Levi moves to his end step. Dauthi Voidwalker re-enters the battlefield under Eli's control, and the turn moves to Eli. Eli draws and is disgusted that he still hasn't hit a land drop. It's painful to watch, but he decides to crack Dauthi to play Spooky's Verdant Catacombs. He taps it, pays 1 life, and he mills 1 card due to Mind Crank. He fetches up Badlands to the battlefield. He casts Jeska's Will, targeting J-Rock and choosing to add red mana to his pool. It resolves and he adds 8 red mana. He casts the One Ring. It ETBs and he gains protection from everything. He casts Birgi, God of Storytelling. He activates the One Ring, adding a burden counter and drawing a card. He passes the turn. In his upkeep, Spooky loses his Crypt Roll and takes 3 damage, milling 3 cards. He draws and moves to combat. He swings Pantlaza at J-Rock. He takes 4 damage, and then Spooky passes the turn. In his upkeep, J-Rock casts Vampiric Tutor. Esper triggers, and Eli draws. He loses 2 life and tutors a card to the top of his library. He draws and activates Putrid Imp by discarding Hoarding Broodlord. He then casts Animate Dead, targeting Hoarding Broodlord. It ETBs and he tutors a card face down into exile. He convokes Putrid Imp to help cast Reanimate, targeting Dockside in Levi's graveyard. It resolves and he loses 2 life. Levi cracks 2 treasure tokens and then Dockside ETBs, giving J-Rock 8 treasure tokens. He casts Grim Tutor. He loses 3 life and tutors a card into his hand. He casts Thassa's Oracle. With the ETB on the stack, he casts Tainted Pact. He exiles his entire library. Thassa's ETB resolves with his Devotion to Blue being greater than the cards left in his library, and J-Rock wins the game. We enjoyed playing with Spooky so much that we decided to re-randomize seed order, shuffle up, and play again.
So the reason I kept this hand was a turn 1 Jeska, hopefully followed up by a turn 2 Lotho, potentially even trigger Lotho and also get a turn 2 Tymna, and just start accruing a bunch of value come turn 2, turn 3.
Game 1 worked out for me in the end, and that hand was kept based solely on getting a turn 1 Talion. So seeing as I have the ability to do that again, I'm going to just keep this and try it again. In reality, this is advice I probably would not give to anyone, but I'm pretty bad at listening to reason sometimes, so I guess we'll just have to see what happens.
The main reason I kept this hand is to get an early draw engine out to hopefully find a combo to close out the game.
Howdy, Levi again, and this round I am keeping a hand that'll get me a turn 1 Kinnan, as well as a Fierce Guardianship to stop any early game shenanigans. Hopefully the Chord of Calling is good enough to get me Trophy Mage and assemble the Kinnan Basalt Monolith Infinite Mana combo.
With opening hands decided, Eli will kick us off. He draws and plays a Plateau. He casts Mana Crypt. He casts his commander, Jeska, Thrice Reborn. He passes. J-Rock draws and plays a basic island for turn. He casts Jeweled Lotus. He casts his commander, Talion. It ETBs, and this time he chooses the number 2. He passes the turn. Spooky draws and plays Bountiful Promenade for turn. He exiles Elvish Spirit Guide from his hand, adding 1 green. He casts Sylvan Library. Talion triggers, he loses 2 life, and J-Rock draws. Spooky passes the turn. Levi draws and casts his commander, Rograk. He plays City of Brass for turn. He casts Mana Crypt. He casts Green Sun Zenith, where X equals 2. It resolves and he tutors up Kinnan, Bonder Prodigy, to the battlefield. He passes the turn. In his upkeep, Eli loses his Crypt roll and takes 3 life. He draws and plays Lotho, Corrupt Sheriff. Talion triggers, he loses 2 life, and J-Rock draws. Eli casts Talisman of Hierarchy. Talion triggers, he loses 2 life, and J-Rock draws. Lotho triggers, and Eli loses a life and creates a treasure token. He casts Dark Ritual, adding 3 black to his mana pool. He cracks his treasure and casts his other commander, Tymna the Weaver. Talion triggers, he loses 2 life, and J-Rock draws. Eli then passes the turn. J-Rock draws and plays Ancient Tomb for turn. He casts Mox Opal. It moves to end step, discarding hand size, and the turn moves to Spooky. During his draw step, Sylvan Library triggers. Spooky draws 3 and keeps them all, paying 8 life. He plays Boseiju, who endures, as a land for turn. He passes the turn. In his upkeep, Levi wins his Crypt roll. He draws and plays a Wooded Foothills for turn. He sacks it, pays 1 life, and fetches up a tropical island to the battlefield. He passes the turn. In his upkeep, Eli wins his Crypt roll. He draws and activates Jeska, targeting Tymna. He moves to combat and swings Tymna at Spooky and Lotho at Levi. They both take it, and Eli gains 6 through Tymna's lifelink. In his second main phase, he pays 2 and draws 2 through Tymna. He plays Bloodstained Mire for turn. He casts Dauntless Dismantler. Talion triggers, he loses 2 life, and J-Rock draws. In response, J-Rock casts Stern Scolding. In response to that, Eli casts Red Elemental Blast, targeting Stern Scolding. Lotho triggers, Eli loses a life and creates a treasure token. In response, Levi casts Fierce Guardianship for its alternative casting cost, targeting the Red Elemental Blast. Fierce counters REB, and Stern Scolding counters Dauntless Dismantler. Eli then passes the turn. J-Rock draws and casts Chrome Mox. It ETBs and he imprints Opposition Agent. He casts Wishclaw Talisman. Lotho triggers, Eli loses a life and creates a treasure token. J-Rock attempts to pass, but in response, Spooky casts Worldly Tutor. He tutors up a Dockside Extortionist to the top of his library. The turn moves to Spooky. During his draw step, Sylvan Library triggers. Spooky draws 3 and keeps 2 of them, paying 4 life. He casts Green Sun Zenith, where X equals 1. Talion triggers, he loses 2 life, and J-Rock draws. Spooky then tutors up Tinderwall to the battlefield. He sacks Tinderwall, adding 2 red to his mana pool. He casts Dockside. Lotho triggers, Eli loses a life and creates a treasure token. Talion triggers, Spooky loses 2 life, and J-Rock draws. With Dockside's ETB on the stack, Eli cracks 1 treasure to float a white mana. Then, Spooky creates 8 treasure tokens. He casts Eldritch Evolution, sacrificing Dockside as an additional cost. It resolves and he tutors Eternal Witness to the battlefield. It ETBs and he returns Dockside to his hand. He recasts Dockside. It ETBs and he creates an additional 8 treasures. Talion triggers, he loses 2 life, and J-Rock draws. He then casts Ranger Captain of Eos. It ETBs and he tutors Esper Sentinel to his hand. He activates Ranger Captain by sacrificing it. With the Ranger Captain sacrifice on the stack, Levi convokes Chord of Calling where X equals 4. It resolves and he tutors Phyrexian Metamorph to the battlefield. He has it enter as a copy of Dockside. In response, Spooky sacks all of his treasures, floating 2 white, 4 red, and 2 green. Then the Dockside copy ETBs, and Levi creates 8 treasure tokens. He casts an overloaded Cyclonic Rift. It resolves, bouncing all of his opponent's non-land permanents to their hands. Ranger Captain's ability now resolves, locking all of Spooky's opponents out of casting non-creature spells this turn. Spooky recasts Dockside. In response, Levi cracks the rest of his treasures, floating 5 blue and 4 green. Dockside ETBs, and Spooky creates 2 treasure tokens. He casts Heat Shimmer, targeting Dockside. He holds priority and flashes in Dualcaster Mage, targeting Heat Shimmer. In response, Levi has the one answer that every CEDH player fears after resolving a silence effect. He channels Moon Snare Prototype. The table is blown away. Spooky chooses to place Dualcaster on the top of his library. Then Heat Shimmer resolves, creating a copy of Dockside, giving Spooky 2 more treasure tokens. He casts Eternal Witness and targets Ranger Captain in his graveyard. He casts Esper Sentinel. He moves to combat and swings the hasty Dockside at J-Rock. He takes 1, and the turn moves to Levi. In his upkeep, Levi wins his Crypt roll. He draws and plays Verdant Catacombs for turn. He sacks it, pays a life, and fetches up Taiga to the battlefield. He casts his commander, Thrasios. In response, Eli sacks his Bloodstained Mire, pays a life, and fetches up a Godless Shrine to the battlefield, tapped. Then the turn moves to Eli. Eli draws and plays Mount Doom for turn. He casts Lotho. He casts Mana Crypt. Esper triggers and he pays. Lothal triggers and he loses a life and creates a treasure. He casts Talisman of Hierarchy. He casts his commander, Jeska. It enters with 2 loyalty counters. He activates Jeska, removing both counters and declaring his targets as Kinnan, Dockside, and Esper. In response, Levi casts Crop Rotation, sacrificing his Taiga as an additional cost. Esper triggers and Spooky draws. Levi tutors Gaia's Cradle to the battlefield. He activates Thrasios, revealing Deflecting Swat to hand. He casts Deflecting Swat, changing the damage from Jeska targeting Kinnan to Lotho. Lotho triggers on cast, and Eli loses a life and creates a treasure token. Then the targets are destroyed. Eli moves to his end step, and in response, J-Rock Wizard cycles Step Through. He tutors Thassa's Oracle to hand. The turn moves to J-Rock. J-Rock draws and plays Exotic Orchard for turn. He casts Chrome Mox. It ETBs, and he imprints Deadly Relic. He casts Dark Ritual, adding 3 black to his mana pool. He taps Ancient Tomb, floating and colorless, to cast Wishclaw Talisman. He uses the floating colorless to activate Wishclaw, giving it to Eli. He tutors a card to hand. He casts Thassa's Oracle. With the ETB trigger on the stack, he casts Demonic Consultation, naming Chicken a la King. He exiles his entire library. Thassa's ETB resolves with his Devotion to Blue greater the cards left in his library, and J-Rock wins the game. While Thassa's Oracle combos are often regarded as a boring way to win games, there is no denying that it is the easiest to assemble and very consistent. In both games, we got to see how great of a card draw engine Talion can be, being able to assemble the pieces needed to close out the game. In Game 2, Spooky had what everyone thought was a protected win, until Levi channeled Moon Snare Prototype, likely the first time many players have ever seen that card utilized that way. We hope you enjoyed watching the production. Feel free to check out the deck list down below, and we will see you back on the stack.